So this week, in terms of astrology, starting on June 24th, starts out with not too many notable transits, but we do see a few lunar transits that can bring about some excitement, a bit of expansion with Jupiter playing a role with the moon, but also a bit of tension or feeling like our needs aren't too met because of Mars coming in with the moon. But later on in the week, we have some notable transits with Saturn that can make us feel a lot more clear thinking and ready to sort of grapple with a little bit more of complicated situations. And by the end of the week, we see that Saturn goes retrograde. So I'm excited to dive into all of this with you. Hello friends, it's your girl Alina back for another weekly forecast reading. It just brings me so much joy to have been doing this with y'all for I don't even know how many weeks now, and to be going strong. You know, this is a new video concept that I started with a few months ago, and I had no idea if I could keep up with it, but I was like, you know what, I enjoy doing this and I'm not going to think too deeply about it. I'm just going to show up every week. And so I'm so grateful for you guys showing up. I'm so grateful that I showed up, honestly. And I'm so grateful to my editor, Afura, for being an amazing editor. So yeah. But with that said, this week, you know, like I said, it's making up to be a pretty smooth one, with the most notable transit being Saturn going retrograde. But before we dive in, I actually have two important announcements to talk to you about, okay? So at the time that you are watching this, we will be having the very first annual retreat. It'll be currently happening right now in Thailand. So if you want to follow along with our adventures, then be sure to follow my Instagram page, which is Hey Alina Alive. You'll also see it somewhere on the screen, but it'll be linked in the description box below. So watch and see how we do our retreats, especially if you're curious about the second annual Aura Line trip, which we are lovingly called the Rising Retreat, happening in June of 2025, and it will be happening in Costa Rica. So this 7-day Rising Retreat will be all about supporting one another as we expand into our astrological callings, specifically of our rising sign. And we'll be doing that through having custom astrology workshops where we dive into your sign and natal chart, along with things like guided meditations on the beach and in the jungles, and immersive adventures like snorkeling, visiting hot springs, and just so much more. One more thing that I'm excited about is that we have flexible payment plans that can be spread out over the course of a year. And we just have a lot of time to plan because this will be in a year from now. So I'm really excited about that. And also that it'll be in Costa Rica, which is relatively close to us in the States. So getting flights will be a lot more affordable compared to other favorite sort of travel destinations. So think about Thailand or Bali or places that are a lot farther away. So if you're interested in learning more, be sure to check out the links in the video description. Follow me on Instagram to see how we run our retreats, specifically the current one happening right now in Thailand. And yeah. All right, let's start on Monday, the 24th. So as we already know, Monday is ruled by the moon. So whatever is going on with the state of the moon on this day is likely to be more strongly felt. But it also means that on this day, it can be energetically conducive to lean into introspection, tapping into your inner world, how you're feeling emotionally, what you might be picking up on intuitively. Also leaning into relationships and connections and really nourishing the body, thinking about that. That's what comes to mind with the moon. And I say all those things because the moon rules over those aspects of our lives. But with that said, we see that the moon will be transiting Aquarius on this day and over the next few days, making it a really optimal time for if you have maybe been kind of working on something, or whether that's actually at work or at home in your personal life, and you feel like you haven't really been seeing any new results, or you know that you kind of need to think outside of the box in some way to kind of get new results or a new perspective. When the moon is transiting Aquarius, it can be very energetically supportive of us brainstorming and trying to figure out creative ways to approach things differently. So today and the next few days can be optimal for those things. And we also see that with it being an Aquarius, it can make it so we can often feel a little bit more social, and it also can make it more energetically conducive to seeking help or being in collaborative spaces. And, you know, Monday is the start of a work week for a lot of us, so it really sets the tone in a good way for collaboration. But we also see on Monday that the moon in Aquarius will be trining with Jupiter in Gemini. And as some of you already know, when Jupiter comes together really with any planet, it tends to amplify whatever's going on with that planet and add in a lot of its own characteristics in there too, namely that Gemini aspect, since Jupiter is in Gemini. So when we see this transit happen, what it can tend to do is amplify what's already going on with the lunar influences, which is what I just stated. But it can also tend to make us feel a bit more sociable, make it a lot easier to have deeper connections with people, because it's like the state of the moon is again being amplified, but the moon really influences our connections with people and how we process things and our expression of our inner world and what we're processing with one another. But it can generally bring good feelings, a feeling of happiness. But we also see that the moon in Aquarius will be squaring Mars in Taurus. When we see the planet of action and productivity, but really being in action, making sure our will is implemented. Think about structure, even think about war, aggression, passion. So when we see that planet that rules over that aspect of our lives coming together with the moon, which influences our inner world, our emotions, and our intuition, when it comes together in this sort of conflicting square aspect, what it does is it can make it so there's these roadblocks where aspects of our inner world and our emotions feel like they're roadblocked by maybe aspects of our ambition or our drive or wanting to make sure that our voice is being heard. And when this type of transit happens between a square between the moon and Mars, it can bring about a feeling of frustration where it feels like maybe our voice isn't being heard, or we feel impatient as well. Basically, these Mars aspects can tend to influence our thinking processes, where we feel a little bit less patient, where we want to basically make sure that what we want gets done. And this can manifest in a lot of different ways. This can manifest as like you just trying to do your job and get through the day, and somebody else coming in and bringing in that more Mars energy and that coming into play from a more external world. Or it can manifest as us feeling a little bit more frustrated on this day. But ultimately, because we do have the moon in Aquarius and it's being benefically, positively influenced and sort of magnified by the state of Jupiter, I think that it will be through things like collaboration and thinking outside of the box that will help us to navigate these type of transits. And like I mentioned all the time, any sort of transits involving the moon are usually relatively fleeting, and we usually feel the more immediate effects on that day, but they aren't too lasting because of how quickly the moon moves. And so this square aspect and also this trine aspect with Jupiter, they'll be relatively fleeting, but you'll notice them mostly on this day. Now, now that I'm looking at Tuesday's transits, I do think that there could be some of those themes of impatience that could linger on to the next day, but not because of Mars, but because of Uranus. And we'll see why. Tuesday in general is ruled by Mars. So this is the planet of aggression, action, taking initiative, things like that. And like I mentioned before, passion and just energy, just bringing in energy, like a sort of vigor to things. And when Mars is not in the best transit where it's squared or there's an opposition, that can show up as the sort of characteristics that I described in Monday's reading. But on Tuesday, because we don't see any major transits really influencing Mars in that way, it can tend to bring a bit of unfettered energy to the day where we feel a lot more capable and ready on an energetic level to kind of handle the day, which is good. And it makes Tuesday in general a great day for taking initiative in a lot of ways. So maybe on Monday you are kind of planning things out. Tuesday can be a great day for kind of taking the first steps. But we see on Tuesday, the moon in Aquarius will be squaring with Uranus. And the main characteristic that can come from this type of transit is a higher likelihood of things like mood swings and things like feeling a bit impatient. And again, this might not show up in you internally. This might show up in you going about your day and you kind of picking up on that energy with others in some way or things like that. But ultimately, Uranus, we know that that is the planet of rapid changes, unexpected shifts. And so we see that coming together with the moon, this astral body that influences our emotions and our mindset and our thinking processes. It can be important to just be cognizant of that. But from a more constructive perspective, this type of transit is one that can make us, in general, just feel like we're ready for something spicy, something exciting. Sometimes when we have this internal dialogue of wanting a change, it can show up as feeling frustrated, but it also can show up as us just being like, let's do something different today. Let me shake things up. Maybe I'm going to play hooky from work and I'm going to work in my backyard, or maybe I'm going to take lunch and go to this one restaurant I've been meaning to go to versus another. But just this inner dialogue, the moon coming together with Uranus, it can elicit this inner sort of calling for a bit of excitement. And again, it's more of a fleeting transit because it's involving the moon. Next up, on Wednesday, June 26th, we know that Wednesday is ruled by Mercury. So whatever the state of Mercury is in on this day, we will more acutely feel it, for one, but also it makes it so on Wednesday in general, it can make it a lot more conducive for us to collaborate, talk to people, do research, get information, and chit chat. We might feel a little bit more chit chatty. But on Wednesday, we see that Mercury in the sign of Cancer will be sextiling Saturn in Pisces. So when we see this type of transit with Mercury, you know, the planet that I just described that influences our thinking processes, our longing to socialize, maybe ask questions, give and receive information, do research, and things like that. And it's coming together with Saturn, the planet that's considered the strict teacher in astrology, that's all about the importance of paying attention to the wisdom that's around us, paying attention to the callings for us to grow and evolve. And it's currently transiting Pisces, you know, which is this very intuitive, emotional, very observant sign. And when we see this type of transit, what it can tend to elicit within us, we might notice that we have a few questions that are unanswered, that we know that if we speak to somebody who's gone where we want to go. So for example, somebody who's gone down the path of maybe our career path, or maybe an elder, maybe a family member, somebody who is more experienced in some way. It's not always associated with age, but often it is. So it could be somebody older, but just somebody that you feel safe with. Wednesday will likely present a situation where you're in the question of things in some way. Or on the flip side, somebody comes to you where they're in the question. But ultimately, it makes Wednesday a very conducive day for seeking and receiving deep knowledge. And that can be like spending time with your family members and just asking in passing, like, oh, you know, what was it like raising us as kids, mom and dad? Or, you know, what has it been like moving across state? Sibling or cousin, you know, having these types of conversations, or just letting it flow. But ultimately, with Mercury coming together in Saturn, it increases the likelihood that conversations that you have on this day produce and result in intellectual insights that maybe you were asking for, that really are on theme with there being a level of wisdom that's obtained. If you're someone who is like, wait, I have been in the question of quite a few things lately and I would like some answers, Wednesday can be a great day to seek. Wednesday can be a great day to schedule that call with a therapist, an elder, a friend, anybody, or just having a deep conversation and allowing it to flow, because insights can really spark up on this day. Also, we see that the moon will be entering the sign of Aquarius on this day, joining Saturn in that way, not in a conjunction, but they'll be in that same sign. And when we see that the moon, which already rules and influences our emotions, goes into the very emotional water sign of Pisces, it can really heighten our intuition. It can heighten the likelihood that we have a bit more vivid dreams, and it can make it a lot easier for our creative mind to flow in a lot of ways, really supporting the themes of Wednesday being a really optimal day for seeking guidance in any way that you might think of it. And also, I wanted to mention, this can also manifest as you finally sitting down to read that book that you know offers an abundance of wisdom in some way. So be sure to look out for that. Next up, on June 27th, on Thursday, we know that Thursday is ruled by Jupiter, making it a relatively expansive and lucky day. It can make it so this day can be great for leaning into practices that support your growth and the expansion of your awareness in any sort of way, and just exploring in general. So Thursday can be a great day for planning trips, that really expanding your awareness through expanding literally your world as you travel. So it can be a benefic day for like sort of planning travel type things, but also it can be a great day for spiritual, philosophical practices. And again, these are practices that expand our thinking in a lot of ways, kind of open up our awareness, not just from an information sort of standpoint that's more associated with Mercury, but more so in the moment. For example, while you're doing a spiritual practice, you're tapping into the divine that's all around you, right? So think about going into nature, things like that. It can be very conducive on a Thursday. But we see on Thursday that the moon will be conjuncting with Saturn in Pisces. By the way, in case you didn't already know this, two planets can be in the same sign, so they can be transiting the same house, but they aren't conjunct. They are conjunct when they are in the same sign and they are at the same degree. So on Thursday, we see that the moon and Saturn share the same degree in the sign of Pisces. And when we see this type of transit, it can tend to elicit, when we have this planet of practicality and responsibility and maturation, that being Saturn, coming together with the moon, which influences our emotions and our intuition, it can tend to elicit thinking within us where we feel a little bit more sentimental, we feel a little bit more observant and reflective in a lot of ways. Basically, our imagination can flow more so to memories and things based in reality. And our feet are still, planted on the ground because of Saturn, but I find that to be really interesting. And this can be a really great time for tending to your home and your family or your chosen family, basically your more immediate community in a lot of ways, and just giving and sharing love. But I will say that on the flip side, even though it's a conjunction, so it's not considered negative or malefic in any sort of way, there is a potential that if things aren't going well with family, that you might feel a little bit more emotionally drained on this day, because with Saturn coming in and bringing in that sense of practicality, you do see things as more idealized. So if things aren't going the way you want or the way that you expected, that can be more acutely felt on this day. But yeah, that is Thursday. All right, next up, Friday, June 28th. We know that Friday is ruled by Venus, the planet of love and relationships, making any given Friday feel a bit more easy to tap into our sense of romance and pour into not only love to others, but self-love, pouring into ourselves. And I think that it's really great that that's the end of the work week for us, so we can really wind down and more easily tap into our body versus the more cerebral that oftentimes our work calls for us to be in, and really check in with ourselves in that way. And like I mentioned before, on any given day, whatever state that planet is in will be more acutely felt, right? So we see that Venus on this day in the sign of Cancer will be sextiling with Mars, currently transiting Taurus. So this is the type of transit that, even though you think that, oh, Mars is, all about action and in aggression, underneath that aggression is passion and just energy and drive. And when it's directed in the direction of love and relationships, which it is, because it's in a very complementary sextile with Venus, it can just make it so Friday feels like just more of a heart softening day. You might notice either maybe in the news or around your office or in your more immediate space, potential displays of the love that can be shown between human beings. It makes the day also feel a bit more diplomatic, especially like you're wrapping up the week and maybe you're collaborating with people in some way, whether that's at work or even at home, like collaborating with your partner or with people in your family, with your children or anything like that. With scheduling, it makes the day feel a bit more diplomatic. And again, it's heart softening. It can make it so this day can be really great for taking time to just nurture your relationships and having more of a peaceful time. And that can be nurturing the relationship that you have with yourself as well, and really reflecting maybe on the week and how things played out and maybe what you need to pour into yourself to feel more balanced again. It can be just a really great day for that. But we also see on Friday that the moon leaves the sign of Pisces and enters Aries, which Aries is also ruled by Mars. So we see that the moon is really amplifying the state of Mars, which is in this transit with Venus. But when the moon is in Aries in general, it makes it so the next few days are a lot more conducive to taking initiative, making sure our voices are heard, making sure that our needs are met, and basically not being afraid to initiate or being the first one to speak or schedule that thing or make that call or make that text. It just elicits a bit more of confidence. Both of these transits are really great going into the weekend. Next up, on Saturday, the 29th, we know it's ruled by Saturn, and we have a very notable Saturn transit on this day, namely Saturn going retrograde in the sign of Pisces. And so, as we know, because it's ruled by Saturn, we're going to more noticeably feel this transit. Let's back up a bit and talk about the nature of Saturn. So I've mentioned it before, Saturn is considered the strict teacher in astrology, and that is because it rules over aspects of our lives like our self-discipline, the structure that we bring into our lives, and our boundaries. Boundaries being the things that help us to maintain the characteristics that we've developed in the ways that we've evolved in our lives. A great example of this is, maybe you've evolved and you've decided like, I'm not going to party or do a certain sort of like thing with my friends as much anymore because I realize X, Y, and Z. It doesn't benefit me. Not doing it benefits me, so to speak, right? And Saturn rules over not just that evolution of that understanding of who you are and what isn't conducive to you, but also maintaining that structure through boundaries. Think of a strict teacher. They instill boundaries for a reason, to help us learn and to protect that space within us to grow, right? And so when we see that Saturn goes retrograde, because it normally rules over those things and it's flowing fine in that way, in all retrogrades, we see that there can tend to be roadblocks, stagnations, and sort of hiccups that can come into our lives, specifically pertaining to the themes that the planet is controlling. So namely, for us with Saturn, that being our self-discipline, that being our boundaries, and that sort of structure that helps us with maturing or growing in our lives. So another example is like, oh, you know what? I really know that if I do this one thing, like maybe this healthy thing, and I really implement it, I bring in that structure and I stay disciplined, it's going to help me with XYZ. And the thing is that as with all retrogrades, it's not a guarantee that everything is going to go to crap, right? But usually the things that we experience stagnation, hiccups, or setbacks in are usually tied to lessons that we are called to learn within those realms of our lives. So what that will likely show up as is this summer, we might notice that when we're trying to implement something, we're trying to work on something, we're trying to grow into something, we're trying to set boundaries, it's a bit harder to do those things for one reason or another. If we're working against it and we're like, no, I just need to keep pushing, I just need to keep pushing, sometimes that can result in us feeling overworked and overwhelmed because these boundaries that maybe we're used to, or this structure that we know that we need in order to maintain it, it's not as strong right now. And on one side of the coin, it can feel like overwork and it feel in that way. But on the other side of the coin, if we decide to kind of surrender to it, let go, and maybe focus more on maybe not the immediate trying to work on it, but more so the internal working on it, working on our relationship with our ability to mature and grow and pay attention to the lessons the world is trying to call to us, but also surrender in that, you know what? This isn't working today. I'm going to maybe try and come back tomorrow. If we choose to go that route, in my opinion, I think this can make for a pretty relaxing summer because Saturn's going to be retrograde for a while. There's many different ways that we can approach sort of setbacks or hiccups in that way. And so it can be important to take the lesson. So say, for example, you're planning something out, you're planning a trip or something, or you're planning to coordinate a group thing, and you know that you need to stay on it. You know that you need to make sure that on this date, these things happen to coordinate it, or these people are on the same page. And maybe you're like, you know what, for whatever reason, you couldn't make sure to do that, even though you chose to have that responsibility. And then later down the line, maybe later this summer, there's some hiccups that come up. Oh, I didn't know what time we were supposed to meet. Oh, I missed my flight, blah, 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 because you didn't tell me this. And you know that it's tied to maybe a mistake that you made. Maybe you weren't kind of like being responsible in that way that Saturn was calling you to be. So now it's later on in the summer and there's these hiccups. And likely these hiccups aren't too serious. And you could go in one direction, which is like, oh, I'm so frustrated, we need to figure this out, and just rail against these clear Saturn retrograde themes. Or you could accept it, be like, okay, clearly I missed this one thing and there's way less give right now with Saturn being retrograde. And I'm going to figure out how to fix it, delegate it, and I'm going to move on because you know what? Life happens. And going with the flow. That's what I'm talking about. Like going with the flow. Like, oh, I missed my bus. I missed this thing. Okay, another one's coming in 15 minutes. I'm going to be late. It is what it is. I'm going to text who I need to text about it. Kind of being in that acceptance of it. You know what I mean? Going with the flow. And when we can do that, it can, I really think it can make for a very relaxing time in a lot of ways. You know, many of us kind of need some moments where we're called to actually be in the moment. For example, think of like your phone dying. And even though it's frustrating, it does offer you an opportunity to be in the present moment for a sec. So that's kind of how I would describe the nature of the Saturn retrograde. One last detail is that we do see that Saturn is transiting Pisces. So what I think that will likely show up as is there might be some situations that do involve our emotions where we have more of an emotional response, but ultimately there will be lessons here that they're tied to that have to do with the evolution and growth when it comes to our emotions and our intuition, holding space for those things. It could show up as lessons where it's like, I had a feeling that was going to happen and I didn't pay attention. I didn't say anything. And it's that lesson of, oh, I need to pay attention to my intuition more. I am being called to evolve and grow into this. So just pay attention to any sort of setbacks, hiccups, or stagnation that you see. And, you know, do what you can to fix anything if anything happens, but also consider slowing down a bit, slowing down a bit, accepting the state of Saturn right now and understanding that sometimes it isn't fully in our control. And one more transit happening on Saturday is that we see Mercury in Cancer sextiling with Uranus, which is currently transiting Taurus. So this is the type of transit that really calls for us to get out of our head and into our heart when it comes to any sudden changes, any shifts, anything that happens. Because this is a sextile, it's very conducive. It's unlikely that we're going to feel frustrated by this, but it just is the type of transit that can present situations where it's clearly beneficial for us to tap into how we actually feel about it and tap into our emotional state and what's going on in the body. And I say that not only because we see that Mercury is in the sign of Cancer, which is a very emotional sign, it's a water sign, but also because Uranus is in Taurus, which is really this sign of the body in a lot of ways, of the state of what's going on from a sensory perspective. And so it can be very helpful to tap into that, especially when we're trying to figure out what to do or we're feeling indecisive in any sort of way. And finally, on June 30th, we have Sunday, which is ruled by, you guessed it, the sun, which really brings in these themes of vitality, leadership, and expressing ourselves in a lot of ways. The sun is the ruling astro body or the ruling star of Leo. And we know that there's a lot of themes around Leo of being the one more inclined to speak up, take leadership positions, not being afraid to shine bright, and holding space for our inner child and allowing our authentic selves to shine through in a lot of ways. So Sunday can be a really great day for honoring our personal power, honoring our voice, and that might show up as really speaking up for ourselves in a lot of ways, but also pouring into yourself before the start of the new week, like really making it about you, especially if you have the job or you're at a point in life where you're giving to a lot of other people. Sunday can be a really great day to pour back into yourself and make sure that you're in the right position, you're in the right state before moving on into the week. We see that on Sunday, the moon will be entering the sign of Taurus, making the next few days very benefic and supportive in terms of indulging in things that we enjoy, but also working on stability and structure in our lives, working on consistency and routine and how that can help us. So this also makes it so on Sunday, it can be a really great day for planning out the week or doing a form of a Sunday reset, doing whatever it is that sets you up for success for the week. But we also see that the moon in Taurus will be squaring with Pluto in Aquarius. It really depends. It does involve the moon. So it might be more internal, but we also might see it in others and it resonates with us on an internal level. There can be a higher likelihood that we feel maybe a little bit triggered or exposed in some way emotionally. And that can manifest as us feeling a little bit more defensive or standoffish or just kind of ready to wrap things up. You know what I mean? Like, you know, when you're hanging out with people and you're like, I'm kind of ready. This will not likely show up for everybody. You might notice that energy in some point in others, maybe, but ultimately it will be through paying attention to what's going on internally to prevent any sort of lashing out or being snippy, so to speak, with others. So it can show up as that if we're not as emotionally in tune with ourselves or we're not really paying attention to how we're feeling. Think about like when you're irritable and you don't really realize it until you kind of snap at somebody and you're like, I'm sorry. Like, you know, that type of thing that can potentially happen on Sunday. It's giving hungover for some of us, not all, but that's what it's giving. The other transit that we have on Sunday is the moon in Taurus sextiling with the sun, which is currently in Cancer. So this transit, I think we will be most strongly feeling because we know that whatever planet is ruling this day, whatever state that it's in, we will more strongly feel. This type of transit can elicit within us a sense of inner balance and satisfaction. And it's because we see the moon and the sun, these sort of yin and yang major astral bodies that really influence our inner and outer world in that way, coming together in a really complementary sextile. And it can make it so we just feel a sense of harmony and a sense of contentment in a lot of ways. And it can make it so Sunday can be a really great day to reflect upon how the week played out, reflect upon if there were any hiccups or maybe really positive things. But ultimately, it can be a really great day to kind of process what you've been through, what you've been up to. What comes to mind also is like relationship type issues or things going on with relationships, whether they're issues or maybe things that are forming. And you're like, I want to sit down and kind of process what's been happening. It can make it so Sunday is a really great time for that. But ultimately, it's imbuing a sense of balance in a lot of ways. And another aspect of this transit that's good is that if you notice that other people around you are seeming maybe a bit snippy or off, it feels a lot easier to maintain your energy and maintain your own aura in the state that you're in and kind of like keep it pushing and not absorb that, because the state that you're in feels a lot stronger, a lot more potent on this day, thanks to the sun, our central star, which is the most potent astral body we got, if you think about it. But with that said, that wraps up my week ahead reading for the week of the 24th through the 30th. And if you made it to the end, I would love if you commented 3 sun emojis. Like I mentioned before, this week we will be in Thailand. I will be in Thailand with my Auraline Traveler, with our group, hosting this very first annual retreat. Be sure to follow me on Instagram to follow along with what's going on. And if you're interested in the Auraline retreat, be sure to click the link and learn more about it. Tickets are on sale now, and we have a limited number of early bird spots, so you can actually get a discounted price. So if you're really serious about this, be sure to check it out. There are payment plan options. Trova Trip is actually working with a firm as well to help with that. We did a live stream. I did a summer solstice live stream where I did a guided meditation, and we also talked about details. I did a Q&A live talking about any sort of details that you want to know about for the Costa Rica retreat happening this time next year. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check it out. But with that said, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.